is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio.
Here's another Facebook Live event from PHLV Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Smart People Travel Wise, a podcast where we discuss all things about travel. Happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm your host, Tennie Sumague, coming to you from New York City, where it's 97 degrees and it's smoking hot, which is why I'm staying indoors. I thought about doing an outdoor podcast, but maybe I'll wait till the weather cools down. Happy Tuesday, everyone, and we have a great show and a great host as we discuss about our neighbor, Canada, where, it's not always cold there. It's right now in the summer, but we're going to discuss a hot destination up in the north, the Canadian Rockies, and I'm going to introduce you to somebody who is a very special person to me. He's the reason why I'm in media and can talk and probably a natural in media because of him. He's one of my mentors. But before we get started, I like to remind everybody, if you are watching live, please hashtag live. And if you are watching on replay, hashtag replay. Make sure you tell us where you're coming from so that we can acknowledge all of you. And don't forget, we are on Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget to watch us and like us. And you can listen also on Amazon Fire, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify. What else am I missing? Or you could just simply download the PHLV Radio app, available on all iOS and Android phones. So it's another Tuesday, Travel Tuesday, and I'm going to introduce you to my guest for today. How should I describe him? He's a hotshot radio host who's been doing radio for almost 40 years. He could correct me on this. He got started in Rockville, Illinois, his radio journey, and it was something that he didn't even major in. It's something that just came in naturally. He also is a freelance journalist. He for Eagle Broadcasting Corporation. He's also worked for CBS, and he's pretty knowledgeable in the province of Alberta, which is why he's coming on today. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce, and please smash those heart buttons as we welcome Thomas I. Likeness to the podcast. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Tennie. And I just want to make one correction there. It was Rock Island, Illinois.
Oh, okay.
Home of the Rock Island line that Johnny Cash sang about. I think it's the second largest arsenal for the U.S. military is there. But what a great place to work. It was WHBF. Loved it. But that was so long ago. That was when AM radio was king. That's how long ago it was. AM radio. Does anybody out there still listen to that? Well,
I still listen to AM radio. I listen when I'm driving and through traffic. I listen to my 1010 wins. But other than that, I think nowadays, Gen Z, it's all about Facebook Live, Spotify, all these outlets. There's just so many media formats.
Just hundreds of them, thousands probably, but all kinds of media out there. Good to be on your program today, Tennie. What are we going to be doing?
Well, we're going to discuss why Canadians are so polite first.
It's in the culture.
I mean, yeah, define in your own terms Canadian hospitality, because I get that a lot. And I know that for a fact. I haven't been to Alberta yet, but I've been to Vancouver and Toronto. And I'm telling you, besides cleanliness, the Canadian hospitality is, I just wish more Americans were like Canadians.
Yeah, we're a little more subdued, I guess. Not quite as loud, or at least some of them aren't. I can be loud. I can be loud, but then I guess that's because I spent 5 years living in the United States. Loved both countries, definitely did, but happy to be back home here. But yeah, Canadian culture is a little more subdued. We don't wear our patriotism on our sleeve as much as much as you might find south of the 49th parallel there. But yeah, both countries. Certainly, I felt at home in either one.
Now, our viewers may not know much about Canada, other than there are north of the border. They're way up there, north of the border. Our neighbors. It is the second largest country in the world, from what I know from geography class.
Yeah, I think we're tied with China for second place in terms of land area. But a lot of our land area is just not too habitable, and I'm talking about north of the 60th parallel of latitude. A lot of ice and snow up there in the Arctic. It would be like Alaska, but where I live, it's quite temperate. So most of the Canadian population is within a few hundred miles of the Canada-U.S. border.
And you are from Alberta. You are on Mountain Standard Time. And Alberta, for our viewers, that's one of 11 provinces in Canada.
Well, actually 10 provinces and 3 territories. I hate to correct you there.
Well, you're the Canadian. I know there's 50 states in the United States. And I know, well, here's what I know. Ottawa's your capital.
Ottawa is the capital of Canada, yes.
But tell us more about Alberta. Here's what I just learned, that you don't have sales tax in Alberta, which is probably why, I don't know. I know one of my friends, Chriselle, I'm giving you a shout out because my friend Chriselle from Toronto, her and her husband want to move to Alberta from the greater Toronto area because it's cheaper. But is there really no sales tax? Because Canada is known for their high sales tax.
Well, parts of Canada have a high sales tax. There's 2 components. There's a federal sales tax, and that we have to pay because it's federal. But there is no provincial sales tax, so we only pay 5% to the federal government on most purchases. There's exemptions such as food, medical, pharmaceuticals, that sort of thing. But there is no provincial sales tax. And Alberta is a very affordable place to live compared to the likes of Toronto or Vancouver, where houses there start at about $1.5 million for a single family dwelling. I know people with a small 2-bedroom condo in Vancouver, for example, and they've spent over $500,000 for that. So yeah, Alberta is very affordable. You could almost buy 2 houses in the city of Edmonton for that $550,000.
And Edmonton is where you are located, which for hockey fans, Edmonton, that's you could tell me a little bit of why Edmonton is named, the hockey team is the Oilers. Well,
the Edmonton Oilers of the National Hockey League, they derive their name from the fact that for many years Edmonton billed itself as the oil capital of Canada. The province of Alberta has huge oil reserves, and a lot of the staging area for the for oil exploration, oil drilling, and so on was in Edmonton. It was kind of the industrial side of the business. The head offices tend to be in Calgary. That's where the accountants hang out. But the people who actually do the real work, they come from the Edmonton area and further north. And that's where a lot of the exploration these days is done. So hence the name Oilers for our hockey team, sort of paying tribute to the resource that is the backbone of the Alberta economy.
That's great. That's great information to know. Now I know the story of why the hockey team is named the Oilers. Which, by the way, if you're into hockey, I just read this. On this day, I think Wayne Gretzky, the great Wayne Gretzky, was traded to the Los Angeles Kings from the Edmonton Oilers on this day, 1988. But enough about sports. We're not going to talk about that. This is a travel podcast, and we're going to talk about one of the most popular travel destinations, if not in the country, but in the world, which is the Canadian Rockies. Now, here in the United States, we always talk about how beautiful the national parks here, Yosemite, what else is there? Grand Canyon. There's some beautiful parks in Utah that I've been to, like Arches and so forth, in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. But Canada, you have the Canadian Rockies. So let's give us a little geography, geography lesson here about the Canadian Rockies, Thomas.
Okay, the Canadian Rockies, that range of mountains, and it does extend all the way down to Colorado down to the Denver area. That's a very long range of mountains. But the Canadian Rockies are primarily on the Alberta-British Columbia border. So they're on the western border of the province of Alberta, about 4.5 hours from my city in Edmonton. You end up in the northern part of the Canadian Rockies, which would be Jasper National Park. More familiar to most people. You see more photographs out of Banff. It was more commercialized. It was more promoted, and Banff is about 1 hour just west of Calgary. That's assuming traffic is flowing, because that highway between Calgary and Banff is it's extremely busy, and what should be an hour trip can sometimes take a couple of hours if you run into heavy traffic there. But the Canadian Rockies truly just a spectacular vacation experience. All kinds of places to go hiking. Oh, you don't like hiking? Well, what about skiing? All kinds of places to go skiing in the wintertime. Just a variety of activities. If you're a photographer, some of the views you can capture in your imaging are just incredible. Pretty much something for everybody. You can go from the more developed areas of Banff into the more wilderness areas up in Jasper. There's tours on glaciers. You can walk on glaciers. Just all kinds of things, Tennie.
I know. I see the pictures on Instagram from travelers all around the world, whether you're a nature lover, you love adventure, or you just looking to get away from the hustle and bustle of, in my case, I'm always looking to get away from the busyness of New York City. Canadian Rockies is always a great destination to go to, and it's also beautiful all year round. So, Tom, tell me, when is the best time to visit?
Do you like cold weather? Do you like winter? Do you like snow? Because if you do, then wintertime is a great time to go to Banff for Jasper, because you're probably a skier. You're that type of person that likes outdoor sports. Maybe you like cross-country skiing. These are all kinds of things you can do in the wintertime in the national parks with the Canadian Rockies. But, if you're like me, I like sunshine. I like warm weather. So for me, this would be the ideal time for me to go to the Rockies. We were through there in the early spring this year, and just a beautiful drive through there. A chance not only to appreciate the views of the mountains and so on, but every once in a while you get stopped on the highway through Jasper. You can't go anywhere. Why? Because there's all kinds of wildlife crossing the road. Why did they cross the road? I guess to get to the other side. I don't know. But the one thing you don't want to do is get out of your car and approach them and take pictures. Take pictures from inside your car, because again, these are wild animals. This isn't Walt Disney. They're not human. they're wild animals, and people have been attacked by animals. So you got to use a little bit of common sense, and don't try to get that selfie with a bear or even with a moose or anything like that. Don't be a Homer Simpson. Use a little common sense.
I'm wondering what kinds of animals have you seen you've obviously driven in that area, I'm assuming, being that you're from Alberta. And it's funny because you said animals. I was like, have you seen chickens? Because why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side, right?
Right.
But I'm sure there's moose. What animals can you see off the highway along the Canadian?
Okay, there's moose, there's deer, there's elk, and we'll talk about elk in a little bit. Remind me of that because there's another area of the province that's got a huge herd of elk, and it's a place you likely wouldn't even think of. But you've got elk, you've got deer, mountain goats, those big horned sheep with the long curly horns. You can see them sometimes up close, sometimes a little bit off in the distance. If you've got a good camera with a telephoto lens, again, you can get some spectacular pictures of these animals. Sometimes they do wander close, but again, keep your distance because it's not safe. And above all, don't feed them. Don't feed them.
They're not like birds, I guess.
No, because what happens is they get acclimatized to human food, and then they start encroaching where people live, where people are picnicking, and these can end up in very dangerous situations. I just picked up a story. It was out of Montana last night on the AFP wire service that we use for Eagle News. And it was about a bear that managed to open somebody's car in the wilderness in Montana. The bear got in okay, but the door closed. Now he can't get out. And he spent about 8 hours in that car just destroying it, trying to get out. Eventually, the car's owner was able to, with a stick, open the door. The bear managed to get out of there, but had completely destroyed his car, as well as the destruction, like the guy said. Bears are really stinky animals, and the smell is just terrible. So again, you want to keep your distance from bears, particularly if you're camping in the mountains. You want to keep your food probably locked in the trunk of your car, because again, bears they've got that sensitive nose. They seek that out, and they'll go rummaging through your tent whether you're in there or not. And you don't want to end up as lunch.
Not from a bear. And I love bear. I mean, I love Care Bears.
Yes. We got to realize this isn't Walt Disney. This is the real world out there. And mommy nature sometimes is not gentle.
Right. I know that I've seen that. I've read that in books too, that you have to be very careful with animals, especially. I mean, those animals are actually even bigger than us humans.
Oh, they're huge. If you've ever seen a moose, I saw one on the highway, and its legs were almost as tall as the top of my car. And if you hit one of those things on the highway, and it has happened, it generally ends up as fatal, not only for the moose, but for the folks in the car. But these animals are huge. They're they weigh, some of them, close to 1,000 pounds. So again, if they're in the mood to charge you and take a run at you, it's not going to end well. Not going to end well.
See, and that's why Canadian Rockies is a epic adventure. One of them is the wilderness, and we're going to segue into two of Canada's most popular, I would say, national parks, which is, we mentioned, Banff and Jasper. And it's what's great about those national parks is it's right it's right next door in Canada. For nature lovers and adventurers, many want to travel to New Zealand or Switzerland or wherever. But in America, most Canadian Rockies is probably the destination for those types of travelers. Now, tell us a little bit more. Let's start with Banff. Because I hear the best way to get to Banff is through Calgary.
That's if you're flying in. The best bet would be to fly into Calgary, because then it's only an hour. Again, assuming the highway is not too congested, it's only about an hour. It's about 60 miles from Calgary. So you fly into Calgary, but now we had some relatives come up from Washington State, from the Seattle area. They drove up. It's a day's drive. But certainly well worth doing for people who might be living in Oregon, Washington State, Idaho, that whole Pacific Northwest area. It's not that bad a drive up. And if you're going to take a week or so to go on a bit of a Canadian vacation, that would be the way to do it, because the drive up even from Washington is very scenic. You come up through that Vancouver area, then along what's known as the Coquihalla Highway. You take that for a while, and there's some spectacular mountain views there. That's a different range of mountains. That's the Selkirk Mountains, is one of the ranges of mountains that you'll see there. But again, some just breathtaking views as you're driving. My wife doesn't particularly like going through what's known as the Rogers Pass area to Banff from Vancouver, because the cliff is several hundred feet down, and she keeps worrying that I might run off the road. She found it very scary. My father-in-law, conversely, loved it. He loved the views. So again, what you're comfortable with. But Banff is also the shall I say, the more commercialized of the national parks. It's a big hit with folks from Japan. There's a lot of Japanese tourists there. It's considered a must-see destination for people from Japan who travel to Canada. And they simply fly into Calgary. Well, they fly into Vancouver, hop over to Calgary, and then there's tours throughout Banff. You don't want to drive? Well, I don't blame you, because parking is hard there. There's all kinds of bus tours that you can take that get you into the park. You get off the bus, you can wander around, you can do the hike, whatever kind of tour you arranged. It's probably a lot less stressful, a lot more convenient, because believe me, it's tough. Particularly, you might recall a picture from Banff. It's got that big lake with kind of an old hotel. That's Lake Louise, one of the most scenic views in Canada, one of the most recognized views in Canada. But try and find a parking space around there. It's almost impossible. And then once you park, you still have to take the shuttle bus to the Lake Louise area, and then you can hike through there and see the sights. But yeah, very, very definitely. When's the best time to go? For me, I don't like to go on the weekends. I refuse to go there on a long weekend, and the reason why is because that's when most people go. But if you travel, say maybe, and you're on vacation, so what difference does it make? Maybe go Tuesday through Thursday. Traffic's not as heavy. It's a little more enjoyable. But that's basically in a thumbnail what Banff is in the summertime. In the wintertime, of course, again, you've got the skiers, the crowd there, and again, you can do winter hiking as well.
Well, I've seen pictures of Lake Louise both on the winter, and here's a beautiful picture in the winter. I like I like both. Looking at Lake Louise, and it's frozen. The lake is frozen. Where I'm assuming, can you even walk on that lake, Lake Louise, when it's frozen? 'Cause, I went to Lake Placid, and there's a lake there where it's frozen. I was able to, walk around and pretend I was a figure skater. For me.
That one, I'm not sure how much it actually freezes over in the wintertime, whether it's safe. Being Canada, if it isn't, it would be roped off, and you would be strongly discouraged from walking there. We take that pretty seriously here in tourist areas. If you're not supposed to be in that area, it's well posted. But that's another thing to keep in mind too when you're hiking. Register with the park authorities, because what happens if you get lost?
Oh, no.
Where am I? Where was I last seen? Does anybody even know I'm out here? Do I have enough supplies with me to carry me through the night if I'm stuck there for the night? But if you're registered, at least when they do a search, they have a fair idea where to look. People who are reckless and just go off the trails, they can find themselves, once they are rescued, with a large bill for the rescue services as well. So again, you got to use some common sense. You got to be safe. Take some noisemakers with you and some bear spray, because again, you never know when you're on a trail what kind of critters you're going to run across.
So much, yeah. Well, you are in the wilderness.
You are, and cell service in a lot of these areas is pretty much non-existent.
So there, you can definitely not get Wi-Fi in those areas.
No, but why would you want Wi-Fi when you got this beautiful view? Why?
Sometimes when I see something magical and picturesque, like what we see here, of course you just wanna, as Filipinos, selfie, and they want to show it to their relatives. We have to come here, so of course Wi-Fi is needed in those picturesque moments.
Well, yeah, but I think back to when I went on vacation, and now we're talking back in the days when AM radio was king, back in the 70s and 80s of the last century. We would take pictures, and then we'd send the film off to be developed, and then we would get a couple of extra copies and mail them to our friends.
Well, nowadays it's just I don't even know if people will snail mail nowadays. I don't even know if this generation of kids know what snail mail is.
Probably not. I other than advertisements, I don't even get bills in the mail anymore. They come to me online.
Everything is done online nowadays.
But yeah, like I say though, once you're out there, one of the things I liked about it was, and I do this even when I travel to the Philippines. I don't bother getting a SIM card for my phone, because it's nice to go for a month without a phone. I can still use my phone to take pictures.
That's true. That is true.
I could still connect to Wi-Fi, I guess, but it's just nice to be free of that.
And it's just also nice in a place like the Canadian Rockies. You just have to soak in all that beautiful nature and mountains and the quietness of it. And we're going to move on to Banff to Jasper, and the best way to get from Banff to Jasper is the Trans-Canada Highway. Is that correct?
Well, no, actually not.
Oh, no.
No. The Trans-Canada Highway will take you into Banff. It runs east and west.
Oh.
So now we are leaving Banff, but we don't want to go up through Calgary, up to Edmonton, and then back to Jasper. We're just going to go straight north on the Jasper-Banff Highway, the Icefields Parkway. Now, halfway in between, well, maybe not halfway, but in between is what's known as the Columbia ice fields. And these glaciers actually are the headwaters for a number of major rivers in Western Canada. And this in itself is quite a tourist attraction. To walk on the ice fields, there's snowmobile tours on the ice fields where you can get right up there, and I don't know how to describe it. You really got to see it. You can see it up there on the screen. These huge glaciers, and like I say, they feed a number of river systems in Western Canada. And it's really something to see. There's all kinds of tours people can arrange. Like I said, you can walk there. There's even kind of a glass walkway where you can look down at part of the ice fields, and like I say, just take it all in. Of course, it's a little cooler, so you're going to want a jacket even in the summertime because it's ice. It's ice. But just a spectacular view. So now we've gone to the ice fields. We continue further north to Jasper National Park. Jasper is much more natural, much less developed than Banff. So for those who want more of a natural setting, this would be the place to go. Is Jasper. You'll see a lot of wildlife there. Like I said, it's not unusual when you're driving through. You'll have to stop 4 or 5 times as the wildlife take their time dawdling across the street, across the highway. And the speed limits are quite low there. They'd be about maybe 45 miles an hour tops. So that, but certainly an opportunity to, and there's spots where you can pull over and like I say, take in the views. Again, just keep your distance from the wildlife. Another thing, some do mountain climbing. And again, there's organizations and companies that can arrange that, and that's certainly not something you're just going to decide, hey, I want to climb a mountain today, because it does take a degree of skill and training. But there are guided tours up some of the mountains, so you're not really climbing it like the guys who do Everest and so on. But certainly that's for those that are into something like mountain climbing, that's something they can do. I've seen some just spectacular canyons in Jasper, right down to where you can see icicles hanging down. And this is in the middle of summer, in some of the higher elevations. But yeah, some of the canyons there, they're just phenomenal. And what a peaceful environment. All you hear is just the rushing of water, maybe the odd bird, and that's about it. But very peaceful, very, very beautiful, and certainly something well worth taking in if you're going to be up in the Canadian Rockies.
Now, Tom, what do you prefer? Do you have you been to both places? I've been to both places. What do you prefer? Do you prefer Banff? Do you prefer Jasper? Are they both different? Or do you recommend travelers to go to the more lesser known, I would not say lesser known, but the ones that aren't overly crowded national parks in Alberta?
A lot's going to depend on the individual. I prefer the more natural look of Jasper, and it is less crowded. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the distance it is from Edmonton. It's again about 4.5 hours from my city here, as opposed to Banff, which is 60 miles from Calgary, so you fly into Calgary. It's obviously going to, just because of its proximity, draw more tourists. But again, a lot's going to depend on the individual. Some people crave to be around those crowds. They like the commercial developments. They like the shops and so on. I could never understand why you go on a shopping vacation. You can do that at home.
I agree.
But I can't see wild animals at home, and unless I live in that kind of environment. So, like I said, personally, I prefer Jasper. It just seems a little more relaxed. There's a lot less traffic. There's the crowds are not there. But again, that's going to depend on what it is an individual is looking for. I mean, you can ski in both parks. And skiers will argue, well, no, this particular resort is better than this one. But really, it's such an individual thing. If you have the opportunity, if you're coming up from the United States, because of the proximity to the parks, by all means, take in both of them. When you land in Calgary, maybe rent a car, drive to Banff, then drive up to the ice fields, and then further north again to Jasper. And then you can come back through Edmonton and back down to Calgary. But certainly, like I say, for somebody who's never been to the Rockies, I would encourage you to take in both because it's make plans to spend a week. Make plans to spend a week. And if you don't like camping, I'm kind of a city kid, and my idea of camping is, something like the Holiday Inn or Doubletree or something. But if you don't like camping, again, there's all kinds of hotel accommodations available, so you can get a good night's sleep and a hot shower in the morning and just a great breakfast.
I know one of the most popular hotels, I think it's a hotel lodge, is the Fairmont Chateau. I believe that's in Banff. There's the Fairmont Lake Louise, Chateau Lake Louise, and this was one of what are known in Canada as the old railway hotels. One of the reasons Canada came together like it did, as opposed to ending up, at least parts of it ending up as part of the United States, was the Canadian Pacific Railway, which was built from east to west across the country to kind of unite the country back in the 1800s. That was how you got from Vancouver to Toronto. And along that rail route, which took maybe a week to cross the country by rail, there were hotels. And these were huge, luxurious. They looked like castles. They called them the railway hotels because they were owned by the railroads. And if I don't know whether we've got a picture of the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel or the Chateau Lake Louise, but they look like old castles. So yeah, those two are like I said, railway hotels. Now you go up to Jasper. There's what's known as the Jasper Park Lodge, and that's kind of more of a rustic setting. Okay, up there on the screen. Now that's a railway hotel up there. That's a railway hotel up there. The Jasper Park Lodge is a little more rustic. They have cabins and it's again a very, very nice hotel. But again, it seems to be in a little more natural setting than that sort of grand chateau look of the railway hotels. And I think also one of the most, I would say, a lot that's on travelers' bucket list is the whole the rail system from Vancouver to Toronto and Toronto to Vancouver. That's one of the most popular train travel destinations that many want to take. And yes, that takes about like a week, I believe.
Yeah, it's 5 or 6 days, and one of the rail service in Canada is is primarily cargo trains. Passenger service is almost non-existent. Part of it is just the lack of demand. We've got a relatively small population, about a tenth of what you have in America, and we have some very large distances to cover. So that train from Toronto to Vancouver runs 3 times a week, and it comes up actually on a northern route through Edmonton, not through Calgary. So it'll go from Toronto to Winnipeg to Saskatoon, and then into Edmonton, and then down to Vancouver. And the part of the tour that is really scenic, and it's probably the only part of the tour I would take, would be from Edmonton to Vancouver, because now you're going through that whole mountain area, not only the Rocky Mountains, but again through the Selkirk Mountains and other mountain ranges in British Columbia. Just some spectacular views that I don't know how to describe them, but they're just spectacular views that they're priceless. So again, if you ever get a chance to take that trip from just even the segment from Edmonton to Vancouver, it's well worth it. Well worth it.
And one of the most memorable, or I should say, memorable or nowadays Instagrammable scenic drives that I've taken was Utah to Colorado, which is also kind of part of the the Rocky Mountains, and it was very picturesque. Highway 12, when you go all over from Colorado to Utah, it's scenic, one of the most epic drives you could ever take. But in Canada, and we're going to go back to the Trans-Canada Highway, which is also considered one of the world's most epic drives that anyone can take. So where can the Trans-Canada Highway take you across, I would say, across Alberta, or, yeah?
Well, actually, let's start at the beginning. We'll start out in the west here. You go over to Vancouver Island in the city of Victoria, and that's kind of the beginning of the Trans-Canada Highway, or the end, depending which way you went. If you came from the east, it would be the end. But no, we're going to go east. So we'll start in Victoria on Vancouver Island. Now you can see there on the screen that lower line, not the upper one, the lower orange line is the Trans-Canada. You take a ferry from Victoria to Vancouver. And then Vancouver, you go through the mountains there, through that route, through the Rogers Pass that my wife doesn't like, but my father-in-law did, with the steep drop-offs from the highway. You go into Calgary, and then from Calgary, you go to Medicine Hat. Now, we're going to stop in Medicine Hat, because remember, I was talking about elk a little while ago when we were talking about wildlife. In Medicine Hat, just outside, there's the Suffield firing range, and it's a huge military base, and it's part of NATO. It's one of the few live fire bases in the world. So armies from various NATO countries, particularly Britain, come up for live fire exercises, and they can shoot off their tanks and so on. And it's all divided up into quadrants, and so you're assigned this area where you can conduct your live fire exercise. But they're very conscious about the environment there, and they have one of the largest herds of elk that they actually preserve in this Suffield area. You'd never think on a live fire military base they're taking care of wildlife. Yep, they're not shooting them for lunch. They're actually preserving them, and there's this huge herd of elk there. So anyway, now we'll leave Suffield and Medicine Hat and continue on through the capital of Saskatchewan, which is Regina, and then we angle up a little bit on the Trans-Canada, and we'll get into Manitoba and into Winnipeg. Now it's a long drive from Winnipeg to Toronto, and again still on the Trans-Canada. Then you'll go to Montreal, and then you'll go into the province of New Brunswick, eventually into Nova Scotia, and then you can take either a bridge or a ferry to Prince Edward Island.
Wow, that's
province
a long way.
Yeah, the province of Newfoundland, well, that's a separate island further north, and it's either an 8-hour ferry ride or an hour and a half flight. And again, we should get somebody on the program from Newfoundland, because it's a very unique part of Canada. It was the last province to join Canada. It was actually a British colony until 1949. Newfoundland has some very unique sites there as well. And certainly, again, another destination that you might want to take in. So that's your trip across Canada on the Trans-Canada Highway.
Yeah, there you go, with the Maple Leaf Trans-Canada 1.
Yes. Yeah, that's the marking there. That would be the equivalent of that would be our interstate, basically.
I-95, or that's that's one of the popular interstates here in the East Coast. I think in going to Las Vegas, maybe it's, I think.
No, you would take probably Interstate 80.
80 or
the even numbers go east and west. I used to go on I-80 all the time when I lived in Illinois and came back to Canada. But Interstate 80 was all the way through Iowa up to South Dakota and then north.
Yeah, so we have a couple of minutes, and I didn't want to, because you are talking so much about elk.
we actually even named our football team after them.
Yes, correct. The Edmonton Elks.
The Edmonton Elks, and I want to put a plug in here for an Eagle program that I did on the president and chief executive officer of the team. He was just hired this past year. His name is Victor Cui, Filipino descent, and we did a profile on him on an Eagle program called Journey. So I'm going to put in a plug for that, and you can find it up there somewhere on the internet, on YouTube.
And we're gonna do want to ask you, because there is a national park in Alberta, Elk Island National Park.
Yes,
and that we should not avoid.
You know what? Again, when you go to a national park, use some common sense. Elk Island is about 45 minutes from Edmonton. We've gone there from time to time ourselves, and it isn't the elk there that you have to worry so much about. It's the buffalo, also known as bison, but it's the buffalo. And again, don't be a Homer Simpson and decide you want to play with the buffalo and get up close. Those things are huge. And they can get mean. They don't like to be disturbed, particularly if they got young'uns around them. You know, they're going to be protective. So again, take all the pictures you want. Telephoto lens is cheaper than your life. But keep your distance. Keep your distance. They're kept behind fences, but sometimes people like to, they don't think the fence applies to them. They're not going to hurt me. You know, I saw one on Walt Disney once. He was like a pet. Well, no, they're not pets. They're not pets.
Are there any other great alternatives for travel, to avoid the crowdedness of the nationally known parks like Banff and Jasper that people can go to in Alberta, like in maybe the Canmore, Canassus area, or is there other places around Alberta?
Okay, Canmore and Kananaskis, again, they're kind of provincial parks. They're near Calgary, and they're fairly crowded as well because of the proximity to Calgary. Go a little bit further south to a place called Lethbridge, Alberta. That's about 5 hours south of Edmonton, a couple of hours south of Calgary. And there's Waterton National Parks, and that park is also very, very beautiful, and it borders on the Rockies. You'll see a lot of sites there, and if you're at all interested in Indigenous culture, Indigenous heritage, there are a lot of museums there, world-class museums of Indigenous culture that you can take in. One's called Writing on Stone Heritage Site. It's a World Heritage Site. Like I said, there's a lot you can learn there. And one other place, my wife took her relatives who came up from Seattle. It's a little further west, and kind of looks like it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a place called Drumheller, and that's where the first dinosaur fossils were found in Western Canada. And again, there's a huge world-class museum and research site there for those who are interested in dinosaurs and fossils and things like that. So that's another alternative, and it's only maybe about an hour and a half outside of Calgary, and we see a T-Rex up there looking pretty hungry on the screen. He looks like he's missed a few meals because all of his skin is gone.
I know. Well, kids love dinosaurs. I don't know one kid that I've never met a kid who doesn't like dinosaurs. So families, if you are watching, this is probably one trip that you want to take your children to. You can see elk.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing, and it's the real thing there. I've seen that museum, and like I said, there's a number of world-class researchers are based out of there doing studies, and they're still unearthing in parts of Alberta dinosaur relics. So certainly, yeah, that's Drumheller, Alberta.
In the Canadian Rockies, for our viewers, there's so much you can do. Wintertime is a great time to come, even though Thomas doesn't like the winter time because it's too cold. You could do like walking on a glacier. You could do, I believe you could even do dog sledding across any of those parks. Snowboarding is also a hit. But also the summertime, you could do. There's so much you could do during the summertime. Just even immersing in the beauty of the mountains in itself.
So something else you can immerse yourself into, I forgot to mention, is both parks have these indoor mineral pools. They're hot springs, and this water comes up from down below, and people say it's got therapeutic value. But very relaxing. Again, there's hot springs in both the Banff and Jasper parks. So something else you can take in there as well.
There's so much to take in, and that should be something that all our travelers should put on their ultimate bucket list. I know, Tom, I will, just to let our viewers know, I've never met him. All of our communication has been through the use of Zoom and all these
Yeah, we've broadcast before on the Eagle Broadcasting Network as well.
And I feel like I've known Tom all my life. And he has taught me so much about journalism. Well, thank you, Tom, for coming on to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to work with you, Tennie, and hope to see you again.
Yeah, same here.
In person one of these days too.
I hope to see you in Edmonton. Probably you could take me to Elk Island, and I will not be that kid to come out of the car and take my Instagrammable moments with those elks and bisons and bears. Oh my! Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And thank you for our viewers, because without your support, this would be impossible. Smart People Travel Wise airs every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 p.m. Pacific. I'm your host, Tennie Sumague. Thank you for listening, and see you again next time. Take care.
This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio.